6 lines of code is all it takes to write your first machine learning program. My name's Josh Gordon, and today I'll walk you through writing Hello World for machine learning. In the first few episodes of this series, we'll teach you how to get started with machine learning from scratch. To do that, we'll work with two open source libraries, scikit-learn and TensorFlow. We'll see scikit in action in a minute, but first let's talk quickly about what machine learning is and why it's important. You can think of machine learning as a subfield of artificial intelligence. Early AI programs typically excelled at just one thing. For example, Deep Blue could play chess at a championship level, but that's all it could do. Today we want to write one program that can solve many problems without needing to be rewritten. AlphaGo is a great example of that. As we speak, it's competing in the World Go Championship, but similar software can also learn to play Atari games. Machine learning is what makes that possible. It's the study of algorithms that learn from examples and experience instead of relying on hard-coded rules. So that's the state of the art, but here's a much simpler example we'll start coding up today. I'll give you a problem that sounds easy, but is impossible to solve without machine learning. Can you write code to tell the difference between an apple and an orange? Imagine I asked you to write a program that takes an image file as input, does some analysis, and outputs the type of fruit. How can you solve this? You'd have to start by writing lots of manual rules. For example, you could write code to count how many orange pixels there are and compare that to the number of green ones. The ratio should give you a hint about the type of fruit. That works fine for simple images like these, but as you dive deeper into the problem, you'll find the real world is messy and the rules you write start to break. How would you write code to handle black and white photos? Or images with no apples or oranges in them at all? In fact, for just about any rule you write, I can find an image where it won't work. You'd need to write tons of rules, and that's just to tell the difference between apples and oranges. If I gave you a new problem, you'd need to start all over again. Clearly, we need something better. To solve this, we need an algorithm that can figure out the rules for us so we don't have to write them by hand. And for that, we're going to train a classifier. For now, you can think of a classifier as a function. It takes some data as input and assigns a label to it as output. For example, I could have a picture and I want to classify it as an apple or an orange. Or I could have an email and I want to classify it as spam or not spam. The technique to write the classifier automatically is called supervised learning. It begins with examples of the problem you want to solve. To code this up, we'll work with scikit-learn. Here, I'll download and install the library. There are a couple different ways to do that, but for me, the easiest has been to use Anaconda. This makes it easy to get all the dependencies set up and works well cross-platform. With the magic of video, I'll fast forward through downloading and installing it. Once it's installed, you can test that everything is working properly by starting a Python script and importing sklearn. Assuming that worked, that's line 1 of our program down, 5 to go. To use supervised learning, we'll follow a recipe with a few standard steps. Step 1 is to collect training data. These are examples of the problem we want to solve. For our problem, we're going to write a function to classify a piece of fruit. For starters, it will take a description of the fruit as input and predict whether it's an apple or orange as output, based on features like its weight and texture. To collect our training data, imagine we head out to an orchard. We'll look at different apples and oranges and write down measurements that describe them in a table. In machine learning, these measurements are called features. To keep things simple, here we've used just two: how much each fruit weighs in grams and its texture, which can be bumpy or smooth. A good feature makes it easy to discriminate between different types of fruit. Each row in our training data is an example. It describes one piece of fruit. The last column is called the label. It identifies what type of fruit is in each row, and there are just two possibilities: apples and oranges. The whole table is our training data. Think of these as all the examples we want the classifier to learn from. The more training data you have, the better a classifier you can create. Now let's write down our training data in code. We'll use two variables, features and labels. Features contains the first two columns, and labels contains the last. You can think of features as the input to the classifier and labels as the output we want. I'm going to change the variable type of all our features to ints instead of strings. So I'll use 0 for bumpy and 1 for smooth. I'll do the same for our labels, so I'll use 0 for apple and 1 for orange. These are lines 2 and 3 in our program. Step 2 in our recipe is to use these examples to train a classifier. The type of classifier we'll start with is called a decision tree. We'll dive into the details of how these work in a future episode, but for now it's okay to think of a classifier as a box of rules. That's because there are many different types of classifier, but the input and output type is always the same. I'm going to import the tree, then on line 4 of our script, we'll create the classifier. At this point, it's just an empty box of rules. It doesn't know anything about apples and oranges yet. To train it, we'll need a learning algorithm. If a classifier is a box of rules, then you can think of the learning algorithm as the procedure that creates them. It does that by finding patterns in your training data. For example, it might notice oranges tend to weigh more, so it'll create a rule saying that the heavier a fruit is, the more likely it is to be an orange. In Scikit, the training algorithm is included in the classifier object, and it's called fit. You can think of fit as being a synonym for find patterns in data. We'll get into the details of how this happens under the hood in a future episode. At this point, we have a trained classifier, so let's take it for a spin and use it to classify a new fruit. The input to the classifier is the features for our new example. Let's say the fruit we want to classify is 150 grams and bumpy. The output will be a 0 if it's an apple or 1 if it's an orange. Before we hit enter and see what the classifier predicts, let's think for a sec. If you had to guess, what would you say the output should be? To figure that out, compare this fruit to our training data. It looks like it's similar to an orange because it's heavy and bumpy. That's what I'd guess anyway, and if we hit enter, it's what our classifier predicts as well. If everything worked for you, then that's it for your first machine learning program. You can create a new classifier for a new problem just by changing the training data. That makes this approach far more reusable than writing new rules for each problem. Now you might be wondering why we described our fruit using a table of features instead of using pictures of the fruit as training data. Well, you can use pictures, and we'll get to that in a future episode, but as you'll see later on, the way we did it here is more general. The neat thing is that programming with machine learning isn't hard, but to get it right, you need to understand a few important concepts. I'll start walking you through those in the next few episodes. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you then. Last episode, we used a decision tree as our classifier. Today, we'll add code to visualize it so we can see how it works under the hood. There are many types of classifiers you may have heard of before, things like neural nets or support vector machines. So why did we use a decision tree to start? Well, they have a very unique property. They're easy to read and understand. In fact, they're one of the few models that are interpretable, where you can understand exactly why the classifier makes a decision. That's amazingly useful in practice. To get started, I'll introduce you to a real dataset we'll work with today. It's called Iris. Iris is a classic machine learning problem. In it, you want to identify what type of flower you have based on different measurements, like the length and width of the petal. The dataset includes 3 different types of flowers. They're all species of iris: Setosa, versicolor, and virginica. Scrolling down, you can see we're given 50 examples of each type, so 150 examples total. Notice there are 4 features that are used to describe each example. These are the length and width of the sepal and petal. And just like in our apples and oranges problem, the first 4 columns give the features, and the last column gives the labels, which is the type of flower in each row. Our goal is to use this dataset to train a classifier. Then we can use that classifier to predict what species of flower we have if we're given a new flower that we've never seen before. Knowing how to work with an existing dataset is a good skill, so let's import Iris into scikit-learn and see what it looks like in code. Conveniently, the friendly folks at Scikit provided a bunch of sample datasets, including Iris, as well as utilities to make them easy to import. We can import Iris into our code like this. The dataset includes both the table from Wikipedia as well as some metadata. The metadata tells you the names of the features and the names of different types of flowers. The features and examples themselves are contained in the data variable. For example, if I print out the first entry, you can see the measurements for this flower. These index to the feature names, so the first value refers to the sepal length and the second to sepal width, and so on. The target variable contains the labels. Likewise, these index to the target names. Let's print out the first one. A label of 0 means it's a Setosa. If you look at the table from Wikipedia, you'll notice that we just printed out the first row. Now, both the data and target variables have 150 entries. If you want, you can iterate over them to print out the entire dataset like this. Now that we know how to work with the dataset, we're ready to train a classifier. But before we do that, First, we need to split up the data. I'm going to remove several of the examples and put them aside for later. We'll call the examples I'm putting aside our testing data. We'll keep these separate from our training data. And later on, we'll use our testing examples to test how accurate the classifier is on data it's never seen before. Testing is actually a really important part of doing machine learning well in practice, and we'll cover it in more detail in a future episode. Just for this exercise, I'll remove one example of each type of flower. And as it happens, the data set is ordered so the first setosa is at index 0, and the first versicolor is at 50, and so on. The syntax looks a little bit complicated, but all I'm doing is removing 3 entries from the data and target variables. Then I'll create 2 new sets of variables, one for training and one for testing. Training will have the majority of our data, and testing will have just the examples I removed. Now, just as before, we can create a decision tree classifier and train it on our training data. Before we visualize it, let's use the tree to classify our testing data. We know we have one flower of each type, and we can print out the labels we expect. Now let's see what the tree predicts. We'll give it the features for our testing data, and we'll get back labels. You can see the predicted labels match our testing data. That means it got them all right. Now keep in mind this was a very simple test, and we'll go into more detail down the road. Now let's visualize the tree so we can see how the classifier works. To do that, I'm going to copy-paste some code in from Scikit's tutorials. And because this code is for visualization and not machine learning concepts, I won't cover the details here. Note that I'm combining the code from these 2 examples to create an easy-to-read PDF. I can run our script and open up the PDF, and we can see the tree. To use it to classify data, you start by reading from the top. Each node asks a yes or no question about one of the features. For example, this node asks if the petal width is less than 0.8 centimeters. If it's true for the example you're classifying, go left, otherwise go right. Now let's use this tree to classify an example from our testing data. Here are the features and label for our first testing flower. Remember, you can find the feature names by looking at the metadata. We know this flower is a setosa, so let's see what the tree predicts. I'll resize the windows to make this easier to see. And the first question the tree asks is whether the petal width is less than 0.8 centimeters. That's the 4th feature. The answer is true, so we proceed left. At this point, we're already at a leaf node. There are no other questions to ask, so the tree gives us a prediction, setosa, and it's right. Notice the label is 0, which indexes to that type of flower. Now let's try our second testing example. This one is a versicolor. Let's see what the tree predicts. Again, we read from the top, and this time the petal width is greater than 0.8 centimeters. The answer to the tree's question is false, so we go right. The next question the tree asks is whether the petal width is less than 1.75. It's trying to narrow it down. That's true, so we go left. Now it asks if the petal length is less than 4.95. That's true, so we go left again. And finally, the tree asks if the petal width is less than 1.65. That's true, so left it is. And now we have our prediction. It's a versicolor, and that's right again. You can try the last one on your own as an exercise. And remember, the way we're using the tree is the same way it works in code. So that's how you quickly visualize and read a decision tree. There's a lot more to learn here, especially how they're built automatically from examples. We'll get to that in a future episode, but for now let's close with an essential point. Every question the tree asks must be about one of your features. That means the better your features are, the better a tree you can build. And in the next episode, we'll start looking at what makes a good feature. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
지금 보신 2편의 동영상은 여러분들이 원하실 경우에 과제 및 프로젝트에 활용하실 수 있습니다. 단, 시험에서는 제외됩니다. 지난 시간에 이어서 Gini 인덱스를 계산하는 강의를 하도록 하겠습니다. Continuous Attribute, 연속형 속성의 분할입니다. 첫 번째 단계는 Attribute를 value 값에 의해서 아래 나타난 것처럼 sorting합니다. sorting된 값은 60부터 220까지 10개입니다. 두 번째 단계로 각각에 대해서 Gini 인덱스를 계산합니다. 마지막으로 가장 작은 Gini 인덱스를 가지는 스플릿 포지션을 선택합니다. 이 경우에는 75와 85 사이가 돼서 값은 80이 선택됩니다. 아래 테이블을 보면 Annual Income이라는 Continuous Attribute에 대해서 Short Value와 Split Position이 표시된 것을 볼 수 있습니다. 예를 들어서 Attribute 값이 80보다 작은 경우에 Yes는 하나도 없고 No는 3개가 있습니다. 반면에 80보다 큰 경우는 Yes는 3개, No는 4개가 있습니다. 따라서 Gini 값은 0.343이 계산이 됩니다. 그 다음 스플릿 포인트인 87보다 작은 경우는 Yes는 하나, No는 3개가 있고 87보다 큰 경우는 Yes는 2개, No는 4개가 있습니다. 그 결과 Gini는 0.417이 됩니다. 본 교재에서는 80에서 Gini 값이 로컬 미니멈을 가지기 때문에 80을 스플릿 포인트로 선택했습니다. 하지만 모든 스플릿 포인트에 대해서 Gini 값을 계산을 하면 97이 최소값인 것을 알 수 있습니다. 어차피 완벽한 디시전 트리를 만드는 것은 불가능하기 때문에 여러분의 어플리케이션에 따라서 알고리즘을 선택하시면 됩니다. 다음은 엔트로피를 활용한 임퓨리티 메저입니다. 주어진 노드 T에 대해서 엔트로피는 -PIT, log2PIT의 총합입니다. 여기서 PIT는 노드 T에서의 클래스 I의 frequency, 빈도이며 C는 전체 클래스의 개수입니다. 엔트로피의 최대값, maximum은 log2C인데 모든 클래스가 고루 분포되어 있는 경우입니다. 엔트로피의 최소값, minimum은 0인데 하나의 클래스만 존재할 경우입니다. 엔트로피의 계산은 Gini 인덱스 계산과 매우 유사합니다. 싱글 노드에서 엔트로피의 계산입니다. C1이 0개, C2가 6개 있는 경우 엔트로피는 0이 됩니다. C1이 하나이고 C2가 5개일 경우 엔트로피는 0.65입니다. C1이 2개고 C2가 4개인 경우 엔트로피는 0.92입니다. 스플리팅, 분할을 한 경우에 인포메이션 게인을 계산하는 방법입니다. 기본적으로 Gini를 계산할 때와 같은 방식임을 알 수 있습니다. 스플릿의 게인은 페어런트의 엔트로피에서 스플릿을 한 뒤 차일드 컬렉션의 엔트로피를 뺀 것임을 알 수 있습니다. 스플릿을 할 수 있는 모든 애트리뷰트에 대해서 게인을 각각 계산한 뒤에 게인이 가장 큰 것을 선택하면 됩니다. 스플리팅을 하기 위해서 엔트로피를 활용하는 알고리즘은 ID3와 C4.5가 있습니다. 임퓨리티 메저는 파티션의 숫자가 많아질수록 작아진다는 문제점을 갖고 있습니다. 예시를 보면 파티션이 2개, 3개, 20개로 늘어나면서 임퓨리티 메저가 점점 작아지는 것을 알 수 있습니다. 문제는 커스터머 아이디 경우에 임퓨리티가 최소값 0을 가지지만 사실상 미래에 대한 예측 능력이 없다는 점입니다. 디시전 트리에서는 파티션의 숫자가 많은 경우 임퓨리티 메저 값이 적다 하더라도 반드시 선호하지는 않습니다. 게인 스플릿 값이 작다 하더라도 파티션이 많은 경우를 배제하기 위한 방법으로 게인 레이시오를 정의할 수 있습니다. 게인 레이시오는 게인 스플릿을 스플릿 인포로 나눈 것입니다. 스플릿 인포는 마이너스 ni 나누기 n 로그 2 ni 나누기 n의 총합입니다. 여기서 페어런트 노드 P는 K개의 파티션으로 children으로 나누어진 것이고 ni는 child 노드 i에서의 레코드의 숫자입니다. 이 식은 인포메이션 게인을 스플릿 인포라고 하는 파티셔닝의 엔트로피에 의해서 조절한 것입니다. 높은 엔트로피는 패널라이즈 되는 것입니다. C4.5 알고리즘에 사용되고 인포메이션 게인의 단점을 보완하기 위해서 디자인된 것입니다. 사례를 통해서 계산을 해보도록 하겠습니다. 첫 번째 사례의 경우 3개로 스플릿이 되어 있고 Gini는 0.163에 스플릿 인포는 1.52로 계산이 됩니다. 맨 오른쪽 사례의 경우 스플릿이 2개로 되어 있고 Gini는 0.167에 스플릿 인포가 0.97로 되어 있습니다. 첫 번째와 세 번째 사례의 경우에 개인 스플릿은 거의 유사합니다. 그러나 분모가 되는 스플릿 인포는 왼쪽이 훨씬 큽니다. 따라서 개인 레이시오는 세 번째 게 제일 크다고 할 수 있습니다. 개인 스플릿으로 선택할 때는 첫 번째 사례가 선택되겠지만 파티션을 패널라이즈하는 개인 레이시오로 선택할 경우에는 세 번째 사례가 선택됩니다. 임퓨리티 메저의 마지막 방법으로는 클래시피케이션 에러가 있습니다. T에서의 클래시피케이션 에러는 1 빼기 맥시멈 PIT로 정의됩니다. 에러의 맥시멈 값은 1 빼기 1-C로서 C는 클래스의 숫자입니다. C가 2인 경우에 맥시멈은 2분의 1이 되고 C가 3인 경우에 맥시멈은 2 나누기 3이 됩니다. 미니멈 값은 0으로 모든 레코드가 하나의 클래스 값을 가질 때입니다. 싱글 노드의 사례들입니다. C1, C2가 각각 0개, 6개 있을 경우 에러 값은 0이 됩니다. 1개, 5개일 경우 1 나누기 6이 됩니다. 2개, 4개일 경우 에러 값은 1 나누기 3이 됩니다. 만약 C1, C2가 3개, 3개라면 에러 값은 2분의 1이 될 것입니다. 이진 분류 문제에 대한 불순척도 간의 비교입니다. P값이 0과 1인 경우에는 한 가지 클래스만 가진 가장 퓨어한 경우이고 P값이 0.5인 경우에는 두 개의 클래스를 동일하게 가진 가장 임퓨어한 경우입니다. 엔트로피는 가장 퓨어할 때 0값을 가지고 가장 임퓨어할 때, 즉 불순도가 가장 높을 때 최대치를 갖는 것을 볼 수 있습니다. 디시전 트리에 의거한 클래시피케이션은 다음과 같은 장점과 단점을 가지고 있습니다. 먼저 장점을 보면은 inexpensive to construct, 만드는 것이 쉽습니다. extremely fast at classifying unknown records, 클래스를 모르는 레코드를 분류하는데 매우 빠릅니다. easy to interpret for small size trees, 트리 사이즈가 작게 되면 이것을 분석하거나 해석하는 것이 쉽습니다. robust to noise, 노이즈에 대해서 강합니다. 특히 오버피팅을 피하기 위한 방법이 적용될 때 그렇습니다. can easily handle redundant or irrelevant attributes, 불필요하거나 관련 없는 속성들을 다룰 때 쉽습니다. 다음은 단점들입니다. Space of possible decision trees is exponentially large. decision tree를 만드는 공간이 기하급수적으로 클 수도 있습니다. Does not take into account interactions between attributes. 속성들 간에 상호작용이 있을 수 있는데 그것을 고려하지 않습니다. Each decision boundary involves only a single attribute. decision boundary가 하나의 attribute만을 포함합니다. decision tree의 단점 중에 하나는 attribute 간의 인터랙션을 잘 다루지 못한다는 데 있습니다. 보시는 예제는 x와 y 간에 강한 인터랙션이 있습니다. x와 y가 작을 때는 빨간색의 클래스이고 x와 y가 같이 클 때도 빨간색 클래스입니다. 반면에 x가 크고 y가 작으면 파란색 클래스이고 x가 작고 y가 클 때도 파란색 클래스입니다. 만일에 노이지한 애트리뷰트로서 유니폼 디스트리뷰션을 갖는 Z가 추가가 된다면 이 경우에 애트리뷰트 Z가 가장 낮은 엔트로피 값을 가짐으로 해서 스플리팅 애트리뷰트로 선택돼서 매우 비효율적인 디시전 트리가 만들어질 수 있습니다. 디시전 트리가 비효율적인 또 다른 케이스는 클래스들 간의 바운더리를 나누기 위해서 사선이 필요할 때입니다. 사선의 경계선은 두 개 이상의 애트리뷰트가 결합될 때만 만들어낼 수 있습니다. 그런데 디시전 트리는 각 노드마다 하나의 애트리뷰트만 있을 수 있기 때문에 사선을 만들어낼 수가 없는 것입니다. 그림에서 보듯이 빨간색의 클래스와 파란색의 클래스를 하나의 사선으로 한 번에 나누지 못하고 작은 선분들이 계단식으로 모여서 사선의 역할을 대신하고 있는 것을 볼 수 있습니다. 그 결과 매우 비효율적인 디시전 트리가 만들어지게 됩니다.